you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but God still got you waiting? You're praying, you're serving, you're giving, you're believing, but the breakthrough hasn't come yet. And somewhere deep down, you start wondering, God, did you forget about me? Can I tell you something today? God didn't forget you. He's preparing you. See, sometimes the delay is not a denial. It's divine development. God's not trying to punish you. He's trying to position you, because there are some blessings that are too heavy for you to carry until you grow into the person who can handle them. Delay is not denial. It's divine development. This truth is one of the hardest to embrace when you're in a season of waiting, because when life slows down, when prayers seem unanswered, when doors refuse to open, it can feel like God has overlooked you. You start to wonder if maybe you missed his voice, or worse, if he's chosen to bless everyone but you. But in reality, what looks like a delay in your life is often the hand of God at work, shaping you for something greater than you can see right now. The delay is not meant to destroy your faith. It's meant to deepen it. God never wastes time. When he makes you wait, he's working beneath the surface, developing the strength, patience, and maturity you'll need to sustain the blessing when it comes. The truth is, sometimes you're asking for something your current character can't carry yet. The opportunity might be real, but if the foundation of your soul isn't ready, the very thing meant to bless you could end up breaking you. So God in his wisdom withholds, not because he's cruel, but because he's kind. He loves you too much to give you something that will crush you. We often want the promise without the process, the crown without the cross, the outcome without the obedience. But God's pattern throughout Scripture is clear. Before every promotion comes preparation. Abraham waited decades for his promised son. Joseph endured betrayal, slavery, and prison before stepping into his dream. David was anointed king, but spent years tending sheep and running for his life before sitting on the throne. Each of them experienced delay, and yet that delay was where God did his deepest work in them. The waiting was not wasted. It was the divine classroom where they learned dependence, humility, and endurance. Delay refines motives. It tests whether you want the blessing for your glory or for God's. Because when the process takes longer than expected, your intentions get purified. You start realizing that what you truly desire is not just what God can give, but who he is. Waiting exposes impatience, pride, and insecurity, but it also gives room for faith, trust, and gratitude to grow. The delay becomes a sacred space where God stretches your capacity to believe beyond what you see. In a world obsessed with speed, delay feels like defeat. We measure progress by how quickly things happen, but God measures progress by how deeply we're transformed. He's not in a hurry because he's eternal. He's not pressured by deadlines or comparison. While we look at the clock, God looks at the condition of our hearts. He knows exactly when we're ready for the next season, and he will not release what's meant for us until the timing is right. And when it finally comes, we'll understand why he made us wait, because we'll realize the blessing required a version of us that didn't exist before the delay. Divine development is often disguised as disappointment. You might see closed doors, unanswered prayers, or detours that make no sense, but those are the very tools God uses to strengthen your faith muscles. Every delay builds spiritual endurance. Every not yet deepens your roots in trust. The process is uncomfortable, but it's producing something in you that convenience never could. God isn't just preparing the blessing, he's preparing you to receive it, protect it, and multiply it. So when God delays, don't lose heart. It doesn't mean he's forgotten you. It means he's forming something in you that will last. The waiting is not punishment, it's preparation. Because what feels like a setback is actually the setup for a blessing that will not only meet your need, but reveal his glory through your life. God always prepares you before he promotes you, and that truth runs through every story of faith, every testimony of breakthrough, and every life that has ever carried his purpose. Promotion without preparation is dangerous because it places a person in a position their character can't sustain. God doesn't just want you to reach the blessing. He wants you to remain there and steward it well. So before he elevates you, he refines you. Before he opens the door, he strengthens your hands to handle what's on the other side. What feels like a delay or a detour is often divine construction, where God is building the foundation strong enough to hold the weight of your calling. When we think of promotion, we often imagine recognition, opportunity, increase, and favor. But in God's economy, promotion doesn't start in public, it starts in private. It's built in secret moments of obedience when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, and when it would be easier to quit. David learned this truth in the fields. Long before he wore a crown, he carried a harp and a slingshot. He was anointed as king, but God didn't rush him into the palace. Instead, he sent him back to shepherd sheep. That wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Out there in obscurity, David learned to worship, to fight, to lead, and to trust God alone. The pasture was his classroom, and the sheep were his training ground for the throne. That's how God works. Before he promotes you, he tests you with smaller assignments to see if you'll be faithful when the stakes seem insignificant. Luke 16:10 says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. If you can handle the little responsibilities with excellence, integrity, and humility, God knows you're ready for more. Every unseen act of faithfulness is a seed that produces future favor. Every hidden season is a preparation space where God shapes your attitude, your endurance, and your heart. Joseph's story paints this picture vividly. God gave him a dream of leadership, but before Joseph ever sat in Pharaoh's palace, he served as a slave in Potiphar's house and endured years in prison. Each step seemed like a setback, but it was actually set up. In Potiphar's house, Joseph learned administration and excellence. In prison, he learned patience and people skills. So when the time came for promotion, he didn't need to learn leadership. He had already lived it. His preparation positioned him for the promise. Sometimes we pray for elevation, but resist the environments God uses to equip us for it. We want the palace, but don't want the process. Yet the process is what keeps pride from ruining the promise. God uses difficulty to develop discipline, isolation to produce intimacy with him, and waiting to grow wisdom. He's more concerned about your depth than your display. If he promoted you before you were prepared, the pressure could destroy you. But when you're prepared, the same pressure will polish you. In those seasons when it feels like nothing is moving, God is still molding. He's teaching you to depend on his voice, to find joy in obedience, and to stay consistent when results aren't visible. That's the kind of preparation that creates strength under the surface, so that when the opportunity finally arrives, you won't have to scramble to get ready. You'll already be ready. The development you gained in obscurity will carry you with grace in visibility. God's preparation may feel like delay, but it's his way of making sure that when promotion comes, you can sustain it with humility, faith, and wisdom that only comes from walking through the process with him. The blessing you're praying for requires the version of you that's still becoming. And that's why God doesn't release it too soon. Every blessing carries a weight, a level of responsibility, and a measure of maturity that must be matched by the person who receives it. If God were to hand you everything you're asking for right now, it might overwhelm you instead of empower you. The delay isn't a punishment, it's protection. It's God making sure the person you're becoming can carry the promise you're believing for, because he knows that the version of you today is not yet strong enough, wise enough, or grounded enough to hold what he's preparing to place in your hands tomorrow. God is not just interested in what he gives you. He's deeply invested in who you are when you receive it. That's why his blessings are not only about arrival, but about alignment. The person you are becoming must align with the purpose of the blessing. You can't carry the weight of a kingdom promise with a fragile heart, an impatient spirit, or an unsteady foundation. So God, in his love and wisdom, stretches you, challenges you, and refines you until your capacity matches your calling. Every delay, every trial, and every test you walk through is designed to grow you into the person who can hold the next level without losing yourself in it. Sometimes we pray for a door to open without realizing that what's on the other side requires a greater level of discipline, endurance, and faith than we currently have. You might be praying for a business to succeed, but God's saying you still need to learn stewardship and integrity. You might be asking for a relationship, and God's whispering, I need to teach you how to love selflessly first. You might be asking for influence, but God's protecting you from pride that could ruin it. The delay then is divine. It's God's process of transformation. He's not withholding the blessing. He's molding the blessed. Every season of waiting is shaping something in you. When God makes you wait, he's building your endurance so you won't collapse when the blessing becomes demanding. When he allows obstacles, he's teaching you resilience so you can stand firm when pressure comes. When he removes people, he's protecting your purpose from wrong influences. The blessing you're praying for is not just about having more. It's about being more. It's about becoming the version of you that can walk in the promise and not fall under its weight. We often think of blessings as gifts we receive, but in reality, blessings are responsibilities we must carry. And responsibility requires readiness. The future God has for you is too big to fit into the person you are right now. So he stretches you until you grow into it. He allows seasons of stretching, not to hurt you, but to expand you. That's why the process can feel uncomfortable. Growth always does. It requires pruning, discipline, and patience because God is more concerned about your internal strength than your external success. When you finally step into that blessing, you'll look back and realize that every delay, every disappointment, and every detour was preparation. The person you were when you first prayed for it could never have handled it. The waiting was necessary because God was creating a version of you that could not only receive the blessing, but sustain it. The delay made you wiser, humbler, stronger, and more grateful. It stripped away the immaturity, the ego, and the fear that would have sabotaged your blessing. The waiting season was the training ground that built the character your destiny required. God's timing is perfect because his goal is not just to bless you. It's to build you into someone who can carry his purpose with grace, humility, and strength that only comes through the process of becoming. How you wait reveals who you trust. And that's one of the most defining truths of faith. It's easy to trust God when everything is moving fast, when doors are opening, and when prayers are being answered quickly. But real faith is proven in the seasons when nothing seems to be happening, when the silence feels heavy, and when the delay stretches longer than expected. In those moments, your actions, attitude, and heart posture show what you truly believe about God's character. If you only trust him when things make sense, then your faith is dependent on circumstances. But if you keep trusting him when everything seems uncertain, then your faith is rooted in relationship. Waiting is one of God's greatest tools for revealing what's inside of us. It exposes whether we're driven by control or surrendered in confidence. When you find yourself in a season where you've prayed, obeyed, and done everything right, but still haven't seen the promise, that's when God tests whether your trust is real. Do you still believe he's good even when it doesn't feel good? Do you still believe he's working even when you can't see movement? Faith is not about understanding the plan. It's about trusting the planner. Every moment of delay is an invitation to depend on him more deeply. The way you wait determines the outcome of your waiting. Some people wait with frustration, complaining about how long it's taking. Others wait with faith, believing that God's timing has purpose. The first posture drains your strength. The second builds your endurance. God is watching how you respond in the waiting because it reveals whether you trust his hand or just his handouts. It's in the stillness that he develops your spiritual maturity. When you can worship instead of worry, praise instead of panic, and obey instead of overthink, you're showing heaven that your trust is not situational, it's spiritual. Waiting also has a refining purpose. It filters out impatience, pride, and self-reliance. When we wait, we're reminded that we are not in control. That's a hard truth for most people because human nature craves predictability. But trust isn't built in control. It's built in surrender. God uses waiting to teach you how to rely on him instead of relying on results. He teaches you that faith is not measured by how fast things happen, but by how steady your heart stays when they don't. Patience in the process is proof that your confidence is not in what you see, but in who he is. Every great man or woman of faith in scripture had to learn this truth. Abraham waited decades for his promise. Hannah prayed through years of disappointment. The Israelites wandered 40 years before reaching their destination. And every time, God wasn't just testing their patience. He was teaching them trust. He was showing them that faith is not passive, it's active. It's the choice to keep believing, to keep serving, and to keep showing up even when the promise hasn't manifested. That's what trust looks like. It's obedience without evidence, persistence without proof. When you trust God in the waiting, you're building a foundation that can't be shaken when the blessing comes. Because once you've learned to depend on his timing, you're no longer controlled by fear or frustration. You've learned to rest in the fact that if God said it, he will do it. Maybe not on your schedule, but always in his perfect season. How you wait is not just a reflection of your patience. It's a revelation of your faith. The heart that waits with trust is the heart that's ready for the promise. And when the blessing finally comes, you'll see that every second of waiting was shaping you into someone who no longer just believes in God's promises, but fully trusts in his timing. You're not buried, You're being planted, and that perspective changes everything about how you see your waiting season. When you feel hidden, overlooked, or forgotten, it's easy to assume that life has passed you by or that God has somehow left you behind. But what if the darkness you're in isn't a grave, it's soil? What if the place that feels like confinement is actually cultivation? God never buries his children, he plants them. The difference is that burial is final. Planting is the beginning of growth. When God hides you, it's not rejection, it's preparation for resurrection. A seed must go into the ground before it can grow. It's covered, unseen, and surrounded by dirt, but beneath the surface, transformation is taking place. That's what happens in your life when you're in a season where nothing visible seems to be happening. You might feel like you're stuck, but God is growing roots beneath the surface, roots of faith, discipline, humility, and endurance. These roots are necessary because blessings without depth don't last. God allows seasons of hiddenness so that when he finally brings you into the light, your foundation will be strong enough to hold what's coming. You don't see the progress because it's internal, not external. But hidden growth is still growth. And just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not valuable. The soil can feel like isolation, but it's actually insulation. God shields you in the dark so he can develop you without distractions. While everyone else seems to be blooming, he's working on your roots. He's teaching you how to trust him when no one's applauding, how to stay faithful when no one's watching, and how to grow quietly before you shine publicly. When a tree finally breaks through the ground, it's because its roots have gone deep enough to sustain it through storms. The same principle applies to your spiritual life. God hides you not to hurt you, but to strengthen you for what's ahead. Sometimes being planted feels painful because dirt is heavy and darkness is lonely. You might question why things seem to be moving slower for you than for others. You might wonder why your dreams feel delayed, but God is working in ways you can't see. He's using the pressure of the soil to build perseverance. He's using the silence to build sensitivity to his voice. Every unseen moment is adding strength to your roots. When the time is right, the seed doesn't need to force its way out. The soil itself makes room for it. That's what divine timing looks like. You won't have to push. God will cause the right doors to open because you've been prepared underground. Growth in the dark requires faith. The seed doesn't question whether the gardener knows what he's doing. It simply trusts that the darkness is necessary for the process. Likewise, faith is trusting God when you can't see the outcome. It's believing that even when you're covered, you're not forgotten. You're surrounded by grace that's doing a hidden work inside you. And when that work is complete, the growth will be undeniable. Every tear, every prayer, every moment of quiet obedience will bloom into something beautiful that testifies of God's faithfulness. When God finally brings you out of the soil, you'll realize that the dark season wasn't meant to bury you, but to build you. It was in that place that you learned how to depend on him, how to stay grounded, and how to grow through pressure. You'll come out stronger, wiser, and more fruitful because you allowed God to plant you instead of letting bitterness convince you that you were buried. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. The soil is not your end, it's your beginning. And everything God planted in you will rise in due season, full of life, purpose, and power that only comes from growing in the dark. The delay is preparation for greater impact, and this truth redefines how we see waiting seasons. When God holds something back, he's not withholding purpose. He's expanding it. Every delay has layers of meaning beyond what you can see. God doesn't just prepare a blessing for you. He prepares you for the blessing so that when it finally arrives, its reach extends beyond your personal comfort and touches the lives of others. What he's building in you through the delay isn't meant to stop with you. It's meant to flow through you. The waiting is not just about what you'll receive. It's about who you'll become and how your obedience will impact the world around you. Many people assume that blessings are meant only for personal satisfaction. They think once they get the job, the relationship, the healing, or the dream, the story is complete. But God's blessings are rarely isolated to one person. They're designed to create a ripple effect that influences families, communities, and generations. When he delays, he's enlarging your capacity to handle the greater purpose attached to that blessing. The longer the delay, the deeper the development, and the deeper the development, the wider the impact. God is not making you wait just to test your patience. He's equipping you to carry something that will transform others through your testimony. Think of how Joseph's delay became the foundation for an entire nation's survival. The years he spent in prison were not wasted. They were training him to lead Egypt during famine. His delay became destiny not only for himself, but for millions. In the same way, your waiting season is not random. The pain, the prayers, the perseverance, it's all shaping a purpose that's bigger than your current perspective. You might think God is preparing you for one blessing, but he's preparing you for impact. The difference is that blessings benefit you, but impact multiplies through you. That's why he's taking his time, because he's not just building a moment, he's building a legacy. Every delay stretches your faith and strengthens your story. It gives you experiences that will later become encouragement for others. The lessons you learn in the waiting are the very tools you'll use to help people who are going through their own seasons of delay. God doesn't waste pain. He turns it into purpose. The strength you're gaining now will be the strength someone else borrows later. When you finally step into your blessing, it will carry a weight of authenticity because you didn't just read about faith, you lived it. You didn't just hear about perseverance, you walked through it. That's the kind of impact that changes lives. When God prepares you for greater impact, he refines your motives. He shifts your perspective from wanting blessings for validation to wanting blessings for transformation. You begin to see that what God gives you is not meant to make you look powerful. It's meant to make him look faithful. The delay humbles you enough to remember that everything you receive is for his glory. So when you finally step into the promise, you'll use it to lift others, not elevate yourself. You'll carry the blessing with gratitude instead of pride because you understand what it costs to wait for it. The delay also teaches stewardship. Impact requires responsibility. God doesn't want to just give you influence. He wants to make sure you can handle it well. That's why he allows you to face resistance, opposition, and moments of pressure, because pressure produces preparation. The lessons you learn through struggle are the same ones that will sustain your success. The delay builds integrity, empathy, and endurance so that when your moment comes, you don't just shine, you sustain. What feels like God taking too long is actually him working for something much larger than your timeline. You're not being prepared for a single moment of success. You're being prepared for a lifetime of significance. Every day of waiting is adding strength to your story. And one day when the blessing unfolds, you'll realize it wasn't just about what you received, but about the countless lives that were changed because you allowed God to prepare you in the delay.